In this video, I'm going to show you how to wrap these overhangs with soffit and fascia and do PVC board that you see here beside me. And if you're new to this channel, my name's Josh. This is all about DIY to save a ton of money. So be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you get notification every time I release a new video, and hammer that like button for me. That's all I ask in return for making this video. So we got a lot to do today, so let's get started. In order to install the soffit, I must first install what's called F-channel. F-channel creates a track that allows the soffit to slide into, and it covers up the back end of the soffit so that it looks good, and it also helps hold it square to the building. So the first thing we must do is install the F-channel. In order to install the F-channel, we must first get a level line from our sub fascia to the edge of the building. And with that being said, as you can see, I already installed this bird box. So we know that is where the top of our F-channel is going to be installed if we keep the nailing flange down. Now, if we put the nailing flange up, we'll have to measure up to the top of the nailing flange and chalk a line up in this area. But I put my F-channel to where the nailing flange is down because I cover it up with J-channel. But if I wasn't going to do that, if this was a PVC board that was going to be exposed, I'd flip the F-channel up. Now, with that being said, in order to get our mark from our sub fascia over to the building, we can simply just level a line right off of the sub fascia and then mark the top of our level so we're level with the sub fascia. But an easier method that I like to use is just take a framing square, place it tight against the building, and then slide it up until you meet the sub fascia, and then mark the top of the framing square. And that's going to be the top of the F-channel if the nailing flange is face down. So I made a mark here, so I'm going to put a nail to hold my chalk line, then do the same about 12 foot down the building, and then we'll strike our chalk line. Now that I have a chalk line to go off of, I'm just going to take a strip of the F-channel and lay it right to where the top of the F-channel is in line with that chalk line, and then nail it every 8 to 12 inches and stay flush with the end of the building. When you nail the F-channel on along with all of the vinyl products, you want to make sure that there is some play to it, so it'll allow for expansion and contraction, because vinyl and PVC both expand and contract a good bit with the temperature changes. I'm now going to get measurements for the soffit that I got to cut in order to fit into the F-channel and nail to the sub fascia. Now, whenever I get a measurement, all I got to do is take my tape measure, slide it back tight into the F-channel, and measure right to the end of the sub fascia. And I got 12 1/4 inch, and then I'm going to subtract a 1/2 of an inch. So I'm going to have 11 3/4 inch is what I got to actually cut the soffit. And you got to do that to allow expansion and contraction to happen, because you never want vinyl to be tight in any situation. So with that being said, I'm going to get a few measurements here and then get an average across the whole piece of F-channel so I can cut multiple pieces at once. And again, I'm going to come down here, get a measurement, and it looks like we got about 1/8 of a difference. So in this case, I could cut them all just about 11 3/4 light. Should be totally fine. So I'm going to cut enough to go across here, which is about 12 foot. So we're going to cut 12 pieces and install the soffit. The soffit that I'm going to be installing is this vented soffit. It's important to use vented soffit when your roof is vented via the soffit. When I say vented, I mean all of this perforation will allow air to go up through the roof and help wick moisture away from the roof and heat during the summertime. So something really important about soffit is when it's vinyl like this, it typically comes in 12-foot sheets, and it covers about 12-inch wide spaces with each cut. And with that being said, this product's made by Certainteed, and Certainteed is the soffit that I've been using for years, and they happen to be the sponsor of this video. And yes, I would use them even if they weren't the sponsor of this video, because they have such a good premium product. And this is Colonial White, and this is going to blend in with the F channel that we just installed to give it a nice finished look. In order to cut the soffit, for bulk of the cutting, I'm going to be using a miter saw with a fine tooth blade turned backwards. I turn it backwards so that way it's not too tough on the soffit, because it can crack it if the blade is turned around the other way, especially if it's cold outside. So with that being said, I put a stop here, and I like to hook the stop to the arms of my stand so that way I can unlock it and then adjust the stop accordingly and then lock it back into place. So that's a nice feature that I've been experimenting with and works great. So now I'm going to set a few pieces up here at once and cut them using the miter saw. I'm first going to adjust the stop to the proper length of the soffit we want to cut. If you remember right, it's 11 3/4 inch light, which is a 1/16 less than 11 3/4. So the best thing to do is take your tape measure, hold it against the saw blade, and then adjust the stop accordingly so you get an accurate cut. So as you can see right there is where we want it, so we're going to lock it into place there. In order to be able to cut this with the miter saw, it must be a 12-inch sliding saw in order to get the total width of the soffit cut in one shot. Now when I do this, I'm definitely going to wear eye protection and ear protection because it's really loud. So I'm just going to butt it right up to the stop and cut it. As you can see, I got 4 of them cut at once, and they're all at the perfect length. To install the F channel and soffit, I'm going to be using 1.5-inch galvanized nails. You can also use aluminum nails as well. The soffit is going to start here at the end of this bird box and then run towards the other bird box on this back side of the garage. Now with that being said, this has to have a gap off the edge as well. So we want to allow about 1/4 inch here for expansion, and then we want to make sure our nailing flange is pointing in the direction we're running the soffit, because our next one will lock onto this slot and then run that way. So we're going to tack a nail here, and you want to try to make sure you get into a nailing slot, because this is just like the F channel. It needs to be able to expand and contract. And now in order to hold this piece of soffit, that's our starter, into place, I'm going to be using the fascia nails that we're going to be using when we install the fascia. And these are just little white trim nails, and they're meant to be on the exterior. I'm just going to pop a couple to hold it into place so we can start running our soffit. For the next piece of soffit, we simply take the end of the soffit and lock it into the channel that's going to be covering the nailing flange of the previous piece. Then we slide it back, and then we just put a nail in the center of the nailing slot and then continue that process until we get to the end. And when you nail this, you don't want to nail it tight like I mentioned. You want to make sure there's a little play. In order to finish up the F channel, I got to get a measurement from the end of the last piece of F channel to the edge of the building. I got 18 7/8. Now we're going to go cut that to length. I'm first going to pull off the edge of another piece of F channel and measure 18 7/8 in this case, and I'm going to mark both sides of the F channel's lip. I'm then going to take a pair of 10 snips and cut straight down squarely on into that channel. Then I'm going to fold it and then cut it just like that. And now we got this cut to length to install to continue the run. I'm now going to nail it into place to finish up the run. You want to be sure to leave a little gap for expansion when you're joining this F channel. In order to finish up the last piece of soffit, I simply just got to hook on the lip, measure over to the edge, and then I'm going to subtract about 1/4 inch since this is such a small piece. So I'm going to get a 6.5 inch piece in order to finish up this end. And I also got to drill out a hole on the edge in order to compensate for my wire coming through for my security camera. So I'm going to cut that now. In order to cut the width, I'm just going to measure over the measurement that I needed to cut this down, or rip it down, I should say. And after I made a mark here on each end, I can simply just take a speed square to make a straight line down the piece of soffit where it needs cut. And then take my snips and just cut right down that line. And now we know that's going to snap in like that, so I'm going to pull over 5 5/8 for that hole that needs drilled out. Then over 1 1/4 inches. I'm just going to take my drill and drill that out. Now that that's drilled out, I also need a couple more of the 1 1/4 inch trim nails to nail this on. I'm now going to fish that wire through that hole and then snap the soffit on just like we typically do. And then as you can see, it gives us enough for expansion contraction around it. And then I just take the trim nails, just tack them here on either the edges in one of the perforated holes. And I also have nailed them right here in this groove, but it's probably best so it can expand and contract a little better to use the hole. And that's all there is to finishing up the run of soffit. I'm now going to install the fascia. And when I install the fascia, I begin at the bird box and actually cut it and bend it around it in order to give it a nice finished look. There's going to be less cuts that way. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get the measurement from this face of the bird box and then the side of the bird box in order to know where to bend the metal. 12 inches on this side, and then I got 12 1/4 on this side. So I know my measurements, and now I can go make the bird box. The material that I'm going to use to cover up the sub fascia is what's called aluminum fascia. And this aluminum fascia is ribbed. And what ribbed means is, as you can see here, there are slight grooves that are protruding from the face of the fascia. It gives it a little bit of design, and I like that. And this is aluminum, so you don't have to worry about it rusting and whatnot. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to bend this in order to go around that bird box. My first measurement was 12 inches. So I'm going to hook right at the bottom of this fascia and make a mark at 12. And then from that 12 was 12 inches and 1/4. So if we come over here, that puts us at 24 inches and 1/4. So we're going to make the mark here and here in order to cut it. Our first step is to make a square line off that mark. Then a square line on this mark. I'm now just going to cut right on those marks. As you can see, the left side's a little bit higher than the right. So with that being said, I'm going to cut a slight angle here so when we bend it, it doesn't catch the metal. I'm now going to take my speed square and lay it right here at each one of those cuts. And I'm just going to score a line so that it's just deep enough in order to give us a nice sharp bend in our metal. I'm now going to take a board with a square end, and I'm going to lay it flush with that groove that we just scored in the metal. And now I'm just going to hold it tight and just slowly bend it upwards in order to make our corner. Now I'm just going to give it a little more bend. All right, now we're going to bend this side. I'm now going to use 1 1/4 inch stainless steel white trim nails in order to secure the fascia. I'm now going to take the fascia and slide it up under the drip edge from when we installed the roof shingles. If you want to check out the video link top right hand corner of the screen. You'll see exactly how I installed all these shingles. But that being said, we're going to slide it up under this drip edge and right over this corner in order to wrap that bird box. Now that I got it placed underneath of the drip edge really well, I'm going to take that 1 1/4 inch stainless steel trim nail and nail it right from the bottom up into the grooves of the soffit. You don't want to nail this right in the flats of the soffit. You want to try to shoot for these grooves and nail it about every foot or 16 inches across the fascia. And I always put pressure and press it against my subfascia to make sure I'm back all the way. Now, as you can see, I need to secure the fascia around the bird box. So what I like to do is place 2 nails in this back because it's going to get covered up by the corner that's going to come through here and you won't see it. So if I put 2 nails here, and then I'm going to put 1 here to where the soffit's going to butt and cover. And then out here on this face, I'm going to put 1, and that way when this fascia comes down here, it's going to cover up that nail. And I'm going to use what's called a trim nail punch. This thing's really nice. All we got to do is slide a nail in the very end of it like so. Then when we nail it from or hit the hammer on this side of it, it's going to drive that trim nail in without risking damaging the face of the aluminum. That first piece of fascia is installed. Now all we got to do is keep running it by overlapping 1 inch with that fascia and run it across the overhang of the garage. I'd like to take this time to thank CertainTeed for sponsoring this video. CertainTeed sent me most of the products that you'll see me installing in this video. And as you know, I've been a big fan of CertainTeed products many years before I was even on YouTube. If you want quality made certain and satisfaction guaranteed, be sure to select CertainTeed for your next building project. Because this fascia is the same size of a 2x6, sometimes it won't be quite long enough to cover up where the soffit butts into the bird box. So in this case, you can easily, instead of using the fascia that's 6 inch, use the 8 inch and then cut around this overhang and then it'll cover up just fine. But what I like to do so I don't have to order a special piece just for this, I'll actually just cut a strip off of a pre-existing piece in order to cover up that little 1 inch gap there. So I'm going to do that now. I simply just need to take a scrap piece. This piece is a little over 13 inches long, which is going to be plenty to cover up that strip. I'm just going to score right down one of these ribs. Either one of the ribs would be fine, but since I have the material, I'm just going to go ahead and go with this one. I'm just going to take my other board and just use that as a lip to break this piece of metal against. Now I'm going to bend this. Then I'm just going to work that off. I'm now going to roll this over, measure over 12 inches. And then I'm just going to take my speed square. Then we're just going to square right here and then score that. Now, since that's just a little bit to bend, I'm just going to bend it up like so with my speed square. And we're going to give it a nice sharp angle. This will be the exposed side here. So we just got to come up 1 inch. Make sure we leave at least that much on. Now I'm just going to cut down this. Then come over at least 1.5 inches, 2 inches. It's really not that critical right here. Then I'm going to score that metal. And you got to remember, most of this is getting covered up. You're just going to see this little strip right here. I'm now just going to install this piece right over the end just like so. And as you can see, that's going to cover up that little bit of exposed edge. Now I'm just going to nail this on like we would any other piece of fascia. Now as you can see, when the soffit comes down, that'll be covered up very nicely. Now I'm going to do the other piece. I just wanted to show you the whole idea here. It doesn't have to go clear up into the top of that bird box. It could just loop down that low too. Again, that's the only piece that's going to be exposed after the soffit's on. I'm now going to start the soffit just like we did on the eaves. We're going to start here and then run it up until we get to the other bird box. In order to install this piece of F channel going up the side of the building for the gable, I got to put a 7/12 on the F channel. In order to do that, we just got to take a speed square, and right here is our 7 common, Then we're going to turn the speed square to line up from this pivot point to this 7. Then keep that angle, and since this is just the F channel, I can hold it and extend it out like so and get it pretty accurate. But if this was something that's going to be exposed, make sure I get the perfect 7/12 on it. But that's going to be just fine. And then we'll just cut this using our 10 snips. Cut square here. Then we cut the angle from point to point, and that's going to be our 7/12 to start. And of course, if your roof is a 5/12, you use a 5/12. If your roof is a 6/12, you use a 6/12 here, etc. In order to install this F channel on this gable end, we're just going to butt it tight against our blocks from when we built this garage. If you want to see the start to finish to when I framed up this garage, check out the video link top left hand corner of the screen. I'll show you step by step. But for now, we're going to butt the F channel right up to these blocks, and then we're going to slide down until we hit right to our bird box like so. And then we just nail it into place. As you can see, it butt up really nice to that bird box, and now we got an F channel to go with. I know I need to measure up 30 5/8 to get to the peak to finish off the F channel on this side. So I'm going to mark 30 5/8 right here. And again, I know it's a 7/12 and I know it needs pitched downwards. So we're going to go ahead and put a 7/12 with the common. So it's right there. And then we'll mark right here where it intercepts the bottom of the channel. And then I'm going to just cut each end and then cut it on the 7/12. Now I'm going to install this to finish up that top. And now to continue the run, we need to put the 7/12 going the other way. So it's going to be going down the next side. In order to install this piece of fascia that overlaps the bird box, I must first measure up, in this case, 14.5 inches to go past the bird box. And I'll show you how to finish this up after we get this soffit done. So we're going to make a mark right here. And now I'm simply just going to take my snips, and then we're going to cut a square mark right here. Then I'm just going to take my utility knife and just score right where the bend is. Now that that's scored, we're just going to fold this down in order to break off that edge. And now this will overhang that bird box without this lip catching. We're now just going to take that piece of fascia, and this end that we just cut is going to overlap the bird box. We're going to slide it right up into the drip edge like we did the other pieces of fascia. Then we go till we butt into the bird box, and then we just nail it from the bottom up into the grooves of the soffit just like we did the other pieces. I'm now going to get a measurement from where this fascia stopped up to the very peak at the bottom, and that's going to be our short point of the cut. And we got 51, so we need to cut it 52 inches in order to overlap 1 inch to the bottom point. I'm going to measure up 52 inches to the short point, and I'm just going to take my pencil, make a mark right here. So the thing with this, we got to come up about 1/2 of an inch to extend past the peak, and I'll show you here in just a minute why. So I'm going to put a 7/12 pitch on this just like the other, and of course if your pitch isn't 7/12, it's 5/12, you use that. And we know we're going to come up just a little bit more to that second mark, so just about 1/2 inch past the center. And then we know we need to cut a square mark here, so we're going to cut this part square like so. So the reason why we have this extend past is when the other part comes up and overlaps, if there's expansion and contraction, you'll still have coverage in the background. And then we're just going to take our 7/12 up here off this mark just to make sure that we don't clip this corner wrong. So we're going to come up into here. So we know we need to cut this peak off in order to allow it to go up without hitting our shingles on the other side. I'm just going to score right here. and we're going to break it right off. Now this is going to be our piece that's going to go up for the one side of the gable. I just wanted to let you know I did clip off that top piece of this fascia where I made the last mark. Somehow I did not capture it on video, but I just want to let you know it did happen. What I like to do where these overlap, because we're on the gable side, you won't have guttering going over this like the other piece of fascia. So with that being said, I do like to put 3 nails face nailed on the overlap to hold it for extra security. That way wind can't get under it. For this peak, it's 52 inches as well, and we just put the 7/12 on it like so. We just line it and then mark it. And now we just make a square line and cut down the cut down the lip. And this one we don't do any excessive extension, it's just cut our simple 7/12. And we try to cut it as perfect as we can. In order to cut the overhang of the fascia off around the bird box, I'm first going to hold it tight to the bird box, take a sharp pencil, and then I'm going to scribe, mark right down the side of where the bird box front corner is and right around the bottom. And now it gives me a place where I need to take my snips to cut out to make the perfect template of the bird box. And now from the face of the fascia where it wraps the bird box, I'm just going to put 2 nails here. And then if this is sticking out a little bit, I'll usually put a nail here in this overlap. And then one right here in the drip edge to seal the corner. And that's all there is to installing the fascia. As you can see, the soffit and fascia have now wrapped the gable end and everything's looking really good. Here's the time lapse of me installing the rest of the soffit and fascia around the building. As you know, I did install this before the last scene doing the gable, but I figured I'd compile the time lapse into one compilation. I'm now going to install a soffit vent for the half bath. So with this soffit vent, it's going to sit in between the soffit and it's going to be held into place that way. So we simply just got to twist to unlock it. And this is going to go in from above, this is going to go in from below. And these are not to be used with dryers. This is just for bathroom exhaust because dryers will clog with this screen and you'd have to go up and above, which isn't ideal. So I first got to begin by cutting a 5.5 inch by 5.5 inch square in order to compensate for this to come down through the soffit. I placed a nail through the soffit to mark the center of where I want the soffit vent to come in. So I know it's going to be right here in the center of this soffit panel. So I'm going to make a little mark right here and push that nail back up through. And so it has to be 5.5 by 5.5, so I'm just going to mark a square with my speed square, give me a template to mark out. Now I'm just going to take my oscillating tool and cut this out. I'm now going to have him come in from above. He's going to stick it down through this hole, then I'm going to twist the end on. All right, he's going to hold it solid while I twist it. As you can see, we're locked on into place. Now all I gotta do is connect to it from the inside using duct tape. That's what it looks like after I connected the flexible vent pipe to the soffit vent. Now that all the soffit and fascia is complete, it's time to install the PVC board to wrap all of the beams. In order to install the PVC board, I like to use two different fasteners. I like to first go through with 16 gauge galvanized nails using this finished nailer to secure the PVC board to the structure. And then after I have all the PVC board installed, I'll go through with trim screws that are designed to be exterior. And with these trim screws, this is going to give it some much better security than the 16 gauge nails. In order to wrap this header with PVC board, I must first start by placing a board on this bottom first and then wrapping the sides. So in order to do so, I must first get the width of the bottom of this header. And I got 5 and about 3/8, and that should allow for any variation on the bottom of this header. And with that being said, I'm going to place this on the bottom first and then secure it with galvanized nails. I'm now going to rip the PVC board down to 5 3/8 inch. And whenever I rip down PVC board, I like to wear a respirator. Even though I'm outside, whenever we're making these rips, it throws so much dust up, I don't want to breathe it in if I can avoid it. But if I'm making cross cuts on the miter saw, I typically don't wear one of these just because if we're outside, there's plenty of air for no more dust. And right here is a piece of the PVC board. It comes in 5 1/2 inch pieces, which is technically 1 by 6. So if you measure the thickness here, we got 3/4 of an inch, and it's also 5 1/2 inches wide, like I just mentioned. So now I got to adjust my table saw in order to compensate for the thickness and then rip it down. Another quick tip whenever you're ripping any type of board down, always double check. Even though the fence reads one thing on the measurement scale here, it's always great to check it just because it's not always exactly calibrated. So that looks good there, so we're going to go ahead and rip this down. I'm now simply going to take my tape measure and get the distance from the edge of the garage to this knee bracing in order to cut it to length. Because I'm butting up against that knee bracing, I need to make sure that I bevel the edge that hits the knee bracing. If your miter saw has a bevel option, we simply just loosen this up in the back. Then we can turn this, in this case, to a 45-degree bevel and lock it into place and make it that way. All right, I'm just going to lift this up into place and then center it with the beam. And then I'm going to secure it every 16 inches with 2 of the finish nails. I'm now going to place the PVC board on the bottoms of all the beams for this outdoor kitchen. A little trick that I like to use when installing this by myself, I like to use a quick grip clamp, and I'll just clamp it here and let it hang down about 1 inch. And that's going to give me a place to set my board until I get it nailed, just as a little bit of a helper, so to speak, until I get it tacked up there. I'm now going to wrap the outside of this beam with the PVC board, and I'm going to break right here in the center of the outdoor kitchen. And the reason why I'm going to break here in the center is because the material only comes in 18-foot sections, so I'm going to have a joint somewhere. So I figured if I put it in the middle, it gives it a nice even appearance. And I'm going to have to make a scarf joint here. It's where I'm going to put a 45 and overlap the next piece with a 45. So I went ahead and got the measurement. It's 160 inches here to the center. And I'm going to route out for these black brackets that you see here in order to be concealed behind the PVC board. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I got my helper with me today because handling this PVC board, it can be very flimsy when it's in this length and this width. So I'm going to be having him hold one end while I install the other throughout the rest of this video. In order to make this joint, I have to have a sliding bevel saw like you see here, because you cannot really make this cut without it, unless you use just a circular saw on a 45, which you can, but having a miter saw gives you a much better job. I simply just used a router to route out for those brackets. All right, we're going to lift this up into place, and then just like we did the trim underneath, when installing PVC board, it's very important that you leave an expansion gap in between where the PVC board butts the beams or to each other. I allow a 1/4 inch per 18 foot of PVC board because when it gets warm out, because I can see where I'm installing it now, it is cold. So when it expands, it needs room to move. The trim screws I'm going to be using are made by GRK, and the length are 2.5 inches, and as you can see, they are a white screw designed for PVC board and trim. So I select these for my PVC board. Now that all the PVC board is anchored with the finish nailer, I'm going to go through and screw it off. And what I like to do is come over about 3/4 inch from the edge, come up 2 inches on this width of PVC board, and then I kind of come up 5 5/8, and then come down 2 inches off the top in line with those screws. And that's going to be my screw pattern every 16 inches to secure the PVC board. So I'm going to use those GRK screws, and when I sink these, I just sink the head of them flush with the PVC board like this. And as you can see, it's just barely below the surface, and it gives it a nice finished look. Now I'm going to screw all the PVC board off. I'm now going to wrap this garage door opening with PVC board and trim it out with PVC brick mold. So the first step in this process is getting a total width of the open, which I got a little over 8 inches, so about 8 1/8. So I'm going to rip down the PVC boards to 8 1/8 inch. I'm going to use what's called PVC brick mold to trim around the garage door opening. And with PVC brick mold, you don't have to worry about painting this or treating this to withstand the elements. It's just like the PVC board. It'll withstand all the elements without having to worry about painting it. And with that being said, we're going to trim around it using 45-degree angles to make the joints. And then we're going to nail it on with the finish nailer initially. I'm now going to use what's called flashing tape to flash across the top of that brick mold. And this stuff is more or less like a rubberized tape. When you peel off the back, it's really sticky and tarry, and then it's going to seal against the house wrap and gives it a nice seal against rain and weather. Now that I got the top of the brick mold flashed, I'm just going to take exterior caulk and caulk right down the side between the brick mold and the house wrap. I'm also going to caulk all the joints where the PVC board meets the brick mold to give it a nice finished look and help seal it up a little better. If you'd like to see how I'm going to install this Certa plank vinyl siding made by Certainteed, check out this video. It'll help you out.